The following broadcast is brought to you by Public House Media.
Resilient, overcomer, motivational. These words describe the speakers you will hear, as this podcast is filled with real stories of people on the journey with you. They have been through hardships, obstacles, or setbacks, and want to encourage you that you are not alone. Their motivational stories and life lessons remind us that beauty can show itself in the darkest times, and we can step out in boldness to let our story impact others. I'm your host, Liz Colburn, and today's guest has a motivational mantra to share with you.
The word onward helped me so much when it came to dealing with things that seemed really hard. And it made me think, I have no choice but to do this because there are people who would be begging to have the opportunities that I have.
Today's motivational mantra is brought to you by Gaby Lara. She is 23 years old and she currently lives in Green Bay, Wisconsin, where she's pursuing a degree in political science and a minor in public administration. She is also a wedding photographer, and she also did our pregnancy photo shoot, and she's so talented. She's a pharmacy technician, and in her free time, she enjoys reading, looking at a bunch of different health blogs. She loves Pinterest, and she loves her faith in God. And today she's going to talk to us about her struggles and obstacles, mainly how anxiety has really played a big role in her life, and in terms of her self-love and self-understanding, and how she's really learned to find the beauty in her journey. So I'm going to let her begin with us today.
So I would say I first started recognizing what true kind of struggle was about my junior year in high school. So it was during this time that I had just entered a new relationship with somebody who was really nice, but I don't think I was in necessarily the best place myself. So I started developing unintentionally. It was actually kind of a complete surprise how it came about. A lot of anxiety, which later kind of manifested, unfortunately, into an eating disorder. Nothing to do with body image or wanting to be thinner, but I actually did develop anorexia. I think why that happened was because I was so stressed all the time that I just wasn't hungry. And it was kind of one of those things where one day it was dinner time and I had asked myself, what else have I eaten today? And I realized I hadn't eaten anything. I had just sipped on some water, some juice or something, but I didn't feel that need to eat or anything. And I remember thinking that's kind of strange. And it actually kind of went on that way for a couple of weeks before I started to notice the real effect it was taking on me. So I would say that I recognized more of the physical problems from my anxiety before I processed the emotional anxiety, which I think are two very different things. So I started experiencing more stomach aches, more the worst part about it was definitely like the panic attacks I would feel like I'm about to have in school, resulting from a feeling of I felt like I was going to throw up, literally almost 24/7. And it was always worse when I was in like a public environment, like social anxiety or anything. So it was a big surprise to me that I was feeling that way. And then feeling like that kind of beat me down to the point where I started thinking, what's wrong with me? Like, why am I feeling this stressed out? Nothing in my life had gone drastically wrong to the point where I felt like I should have been stressed about something. And I just remember feeling very confused and very, just misunderstood by my own self, and I didn't know how to help it either. And I don't think that a lot of the people in my family knew how to deal with it either. So it was very frustrating. And as soon as I felt like I began to have a grip on what was happening with my body, and I started gaining back a little bit more control over like eating and drinking more, my grandmother died. My dad's mom passed away. And I just remember feeling like this is a very odd feeling. Like it was one of the times in life where I'd actually been old enough to comprehend kind of what death was, especially with somebody very close in my family. And I just felt like, how is our family going to get through this? Like, how am I going to help my dad, who lost his dad when he was like 30, and, you know, his mom had been his only parent for the longest time, and that must be so hard. 2 weeks after my grandma died, my sister, who's my only sibling, military, and I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, like another member of my family kind of, not dead, but gone in a sense. I always thought my sister and I would go to college together. I always thought that I would have her as like a close by mentor. And I just remember thinking, like, how am I going to do all this stuff on my own that I always thought I'd be able to do with her? And then shortly after that, my parents ended up divorcing. So again, I just felt like all these things in life were moving so much quicker than what I was able to move along with them. And I just remember feeling like I was in a standstill with all these emotions. I remember thinking one time, there's literally no way any of this can get any worse. Like, my anxiety was the worst it had ever been. I had went through 2 relationships at the time. I think as a result of just so much stress that I couldn't cater to a relationship while still catering to my dad, who was just heartbroken at his mother passing away, his daughter leaving for a boot camp, and now his wife. And I just remember thinking, like, what am I going to do?
In this first clip, she talks to us about having a panic attack. And for any of you who've ever had anxiety to the extreme, you may know what it feels like to have a panic attack. But if you don't, let me just explain to you that I have had a panic attack, and I know exactly what Gaby's talking about here. She talks about this, and I really just want you to understand that when you suffer from severe anxiety, a panic attack can really feel like you're almost like the walls are almost closing in on you, or maybe if it's really extreme, you feel like you're actually dying, like you can't breathe. And so anxiety, you know, you hear this word sometimes thrown around, but when anxiety really takes over somebody's life, like Gaby's, it can really be crippling and debilitating and can really take you away from things, set your mind on things that just stress you out or make you feel super worried all the time. And so she's talking about her journey, and she's talking about how this played a part in her life, and she continues on to tell us a little bit about this journey.
So during these hard times, I remember thinking that it seemed very hard to cling on to something that could be kind of like my salvation, like what is the one thing that I can do to try to help get me through this. And I remember I did have friends who cared that would say things like, oh, like take up yoga, or just try to smile more, or just like tell yourself that even though it sucks, like you're going to get through this. And I remember appreciating it so much, but I was looking, I don't want to say in all the wrong places, because I wasn't, but I wasn't looking necessarily where I should have been, and I wish I would have found these things sooner. So I remember one night I was having a talk with a friend who is kind of more of like a rational person, who doesn't necessarily like emotional side of life much, but I remember he told me one day when I was telling him about all these concerns, he just said, like, onward, like you have to keep moving forward. And it's one word, but the word onward helped me so much when it came to dealing with things that seemed really hard. And it made me think, like, I have no choice but to do this, because there are people who would be begging to have the opportunities that I have right now. And even though I can't necessarily get a full grip of what I felt like my mind was kind of doing to me and what my mind was doing to my body, like, no parts inside me were working with each other. I felt like they were working against each other. But that one word really helped me get through some tough times, as I felt like the sun was able to shine through the clouds a little. And then the other thing is, thankfully, I've always been a spiritual person who has felt the presence of God in my life. I've never felt like I had to discover God, or I never had to really look for him in places that I'd never explored. And I feel very blessed by that, because I feel like I was born into this world knowing that God was in my life. And this Bible quote, which is actually my sister's, she was the one who showed me it because it's also hers. It's Joshua 1 verse 9, and it says, "Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." And I remember, like, one of the first times I read it, it made me cry, because it's one of the Bible verses that really acknowledges that you are going to feel a lot of pain in your life, and you're going to feel a lot of confusion, and you're going to feel like you have to go looking for God, and sometimes you might feel like you're not going to be able to find him. But that last part, like, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Wherever you go. I don't think that just means like a geographic location. I think it means wherever you go, in regards to wherever your mind is taking you, wherever your anxieties or your troubles or your happiness or your blessed moments, or like, God is going to be there with you. It's an easy life. Jesus was begging for God to be there for him even when he was dying on the cross. But I think God promised us a chance, and many chances, to always start over, and to always let every new day be a new day in God's, vision of you, and you're recreated every day. And it took me just the right amount of time that I needed to take in order to realize that. And those are definitely the two most important life mantras, because one is kind of more a realistic thing in regards to, like, you literally just have to keep moving forward if you're going to want your situation to get better. But the other is a more a mantra based out of faith, which is crucial to my life.
Do you ever feel that way, like Gaby did? Finally, you have a handle on something in your life, and something else just comes out of nowhere and hits you like a bus. I know I've been there. You're finally feeling like you're picking up the pieces and mending a piece of your life together. And I think that happens so often, and we just feel like, okay, we finally mastered something. Why are we going through this again? So I just love that Gaby touches on this, and I'm excited for her to share more about this as she continues on.
Something that I had kind of come across multiple times is people kind of noting, like, well, how did you get through this hard time? Like, how did you kind of recover from this? And now that I'm in a much better place, life's never perfect. I don't think that it's talked about enough how it's okay to give yourself the time to I don't want to say wallow in your situation, but to take the time you need. I don't think that looking back on, my journey with this, that any part of it was pretty or brings a smile to my face when I think about that stuff. And I think that is okay. Like, it's okay to look back at a time in your life and say, nothing about that was easy, but there are definitely some things I learned from it. So something that I have been able to look at as a beautiful blessing from what I went through, and what I'm sure I'll go through other similar things in my life, is that it definitely has given me resilience in life. And although I wish that I wouldn't have had to go through what I went through to learn resilience, or I wish that my family hadn't gone through to learn how to get through hard times, but it did, and it taught me how to put things in perspective. And it's also taught me to have a lot more respect for other things people go through. Just because there are people in the world who have it, way worse, doesn't mean that your issues are any less relevant to you at all. And I think that I would come across a lot of people who would say, like, well, it could be worse. And I don't think that that's I don't think that's helping us get any further with mental health, or how to comfort the people we love, or our friends, or anyone just looking for help. So it taught me to have resilience, and it taught me how to have a lot more respect. But the number one thing that I gained from this is humility. And I don't think that I had ever been necessarily a stuck-up person prior to these experiences, but I feel very softened by what happened. And I understand that people can get hardened by these experiences, but I'm actually a lot more like patient now than I used to be. I'm a lot less assertive with myself than I used to be, because I think it's so important to keep in mind what other people could be feeling or the days that they might be having. That it's actually something I'd like to work on, to be honest, to be a little bit more like aggressive with the things that I want in life while still doing it respectfully. But that's just another part of the journey, and it just proves that you never stop learning and you never stop growing, and that in itself is a blessing.
Onward, the simplicity of one word. I just think how perfect that she was in a moment where somebody used that word and it just touched her heart in such a beautiful time. I think about us and our words and how much we have we can make an impact in people's lives just based on a little bit of advice that we give. Even if that person who gave Gaby that advice thought it might have been, less meaningful or not really that important or not that impactful, it really was in Gaby's life. And she remembered and she hung on to that one word. And that was what kept her going. How beautiful. But she still has more to her motivational mantra she wants to share with us.
Kind of going back to what I had said in the last little statement there, is that something that I wish that someone would have told me is that you do not always need to look to get out of your situation immediately. I think it needs to be addressed more often that you are allowed to take the time you need to go through a difficult phase. You should allow yourself the time to heal in your own time, but to be productive about it. So, for me, it was the fact that I felt like my body was failing me, going through all these like eating problems and physical things I was going through, like with my hair falling out. I had lost like 30 pounds in a 2-month period. And I just remember thinking like, oh my God, like what is happening? So, and then in addition to me feeling like my body was letting me down, once these harder things too, like my grandma dying, my sister leaving, my parents divorcing, like literally my family fell apart. I felt like my mind was failing me too, because I couldn't even convince myself to try to get through it. So I remember there was a couple weeks where I felt useless, to be honest with you. I missed so much school. I felt like I lived in the doctor's office more than I lived at my own house sometimes. And I just remember feeling like, how am I ever going to get out of this? Like, I honestly remember thinking like, this is never going to get any better. And it's just crazy how much people were right when they said, you will get through it. I remember thinking like, no, like how do you get over this? How do you get over something like this? But you do. You literally just do. And I think that if more people understood that, hey, if you need to miss school for a month, if you need to spend time alone in your room with God or with yourself for your own like benefit, then do it. I'm not saying like, resort to like a substance, and I'm not judging people who do that either, because life can get really heavy. But I would just want to tell people like, take the time to let life hit you. I think everyone else is telling you to get back up and, get right back up and hop back into the saddle. But if you need some time to feel what you're feeling and give yourself enough time to acknowledge what's going on in your life, I think that would help you more than it would to try to force yourself to be happy. Productive about rebuilding yourself, but I also think it's okay to weep and to be, I don't know, kind of just brought down by what life can do sometimes, because you do come back different. And I'm not saying you're always going to come back stronger, but you're going to come back a different version of yourself in some quality. And I think I just think it's the best thing you can do, depending on your situation, of course. But basically just not feel like in a hurry to rebuild yourself after you've been broken down.
She is so right when she says that people do tend to get hardened by their situations. They tend to ask, why me? Why am I going through this? They get cold. They start standing off a little bit. They close themselves off to good things. And I am just so blessed to know Gaby, to be related to her, actually. She is my husband's cousin, so we're related through marriage. And just following her journey and just seeing her transformation over the last couple of years, even with self-love and knowing herself and her anxiety becoming lessened. But she's so right with how that tends to harden people. And instead, she's choosing this life. She's choosing this life of resilience and rising above. And that's exactly what she's sharing with us today and what she wants us to take away. But I'm going to let her continue on.
Something that I wish that someone would have told me is that you do not always need to look to get out of your situation immediately. I think it needs to be addressed more often that you are allowed to take the time you need to go through a difficult phase. You should allow yourself the time to heal in your own time, but to be productive about it. So, for me, it was the fact that I felt like my body was failing me, going through all these like eating problems and physical things I was going through, like with my hair falling out. I had lost like 30 pounds in a 2-month period. And I just remember thinking like, oh my God, like what is happening? So, and then in addition to me feeling like my body was letting me down, once these harder things too, like my grandma dying, my sister leaving, my parents divorcing, like literally my family fell apart. I felt like my mind was failing me too, because I couldn't even convince myself to try to get through it. So I remember there was a couple weeks where I felt useless, to be honest with you. I missed so much school. I felt like I lived in the doctor's office more than I lived at my own house sometimes. And I just remember feeling like, how am I ever going to get out of this? Like, I honestly remember thinking like, this is never going to get any better. And it's just crazy how much people were right when they said, you will get through it. I remember thinking like, no, like how do you get over this? How do you get over something like this? But you do. You literally just do. And I think that if more people understood that, hey, if you need to miss school for a month, if you need to spend time alone in your room with God or with yourself for your own like benefit, then do it. I'm not saying like, resort to like a substance, and I'm not judging people who do that either, because life can get really heavy. But I would just want to tell people like, take the time to let life hit you. I think everyone else is telling you to get back up and, get right back up and hop back into the saddle. But if you need some time to feel what you're feeling and give yourself enough time to acknowledge what's going on in your life, I think that would help you more than it would to try to force yourself to be happy. Active about rebuilding yourself. But I also think it's okay to weep and to be, I don't know, kind of just brought down by what life can do sometimes, because you do come back different. And I'm not saying you're always going to come back stronger, but you're going to come back a different version of yourself in some quality. And I think I just think it's the best thing you can do, depending on your situation, of course. But basically just not feel like in a hurry to rebuild yourself after you've been broken down.
I just want you to sink into that for a moment, thinking about the fact that a lot of people brush us off. A lot of people say, you can't be sad, you need to move on, it's going to be better, people have things worse than you. But she's saying that we need to allow ourselves time to go through it, to feel the emotions that you're going to feel when hard things happen to you. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be saddened. She lets us know that it's okay to feel how we're feeling. Take a deep breath. isn't that incredible news that we can just feel? She doesn't say to wallow in it, but she says to use the time that you need. And the only person that's going to know the time that you're going to need is yourself. So if you need to spend some time in reflection for a day and that's enough for you, that's awesome. If it's a month, then you may be wallowing for a month or a year. Take the time that you need to go through that, okay? And it's okay. We're all a work in progress. We're all on this journey to bettering ourselves and to just trusting in God's plan. And I just think that's so wonderful that she almost gives us permission, right? Did you feel that? I felt like she gave us permission to go through what we needed to. So reassuring. Woo! Talk about someone who has definitely found the beauty in her journey. I'm just so thankful that Gaby shared her heart with us today. If you've struggled with anxiety, if you've had a ton of things that have happened to you all at one time and you wonder how you're going to handle it, let Gaby be an example of it's okay to take the time you need, and it's okay to not have it all together right away, that the answers are going to come and the healing is going to come. And she just does such a good job of helping us understand that it's okay to take that time. So I hope that reassured you as much as it reassured me. I just think that Gaby is such a breath of fresh air, and I'm so thankful that she shared her heart to help you grow today. Thank you for joining me and my guest, Gaby Lara, for today's episode of Motivational Mantras. This show is presented by Public House Media, where we all have a voice. You can follow the network on Facebook and Twitter. I'm so humbled that you tuned in to hear one of the many testimonies that will be shared on this podcast. I hope you are learning to find the beauty in your journey and continue tuning in so we can grow together each week. You can find both of my podcasts each week, Monday mornings for my show, The Morning Uplift, and on Friday mornings for Motivational Mantras. Please feel free to contact me at lizcolburnbb@gmail.com. I love to hear from my listeners. May God watch over you throughout your weekend, and may your light shine for all to see.